All right, guys. Happy day. Happy Tuesday.
Right.
This is another episode of Breakfast with Mark and Jen. As I
Let's
sit
go.
here getting ready to eat cold breakfast at almost too
Listen,
late in
she's
the
trying
day.
to blame me for cold breakfast.
Right, because he
Talking
tells
about I
me,
take too long to get this thing up and running,
guys,
ready to
he
go.
takes longer than me to get ready because he's always worried about his shape up, edges.
Not,
Anyway,
not edges.
a little,
Guys don't have edges.
well,
It's called shape up.
okay, well, he's worried about his shape up.
Females have edges. Guys don't have edges.
Okay.
But that's not what takes long. Is that we gotta set up the camera and all
I'm gonna
that.
start eating breakfast at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., and then I'm gonna do breakfast with Mark and coffee with Jen. Welcome to breakfast with Mark and coffee and Jen with Jen, because I would have already eaten because
Wow.
he just runs into my lunchtime. But anyway, that's actually not what this talk is about.
No, it's not about that. All right. Today we're gonna be talking about rest. Okay? How to get rest in your marriage because for a lot of people, marriage is so stressful. Just all of what comes with marriage is totally overwhelming and it feels like you're running a million miles a minute.
Yeah.
And how do you actually rest with your spouse
And
and rest
and
in marriage?
and marriage does take work.
Right.
So then that means then if there's work involved, there's got to be rest involved.
Correct. Because if you take the premise of the Sabbath rest and you're going to come from a biblical standpoint, God says, hey, there's a period of work and there's a period of rest attached to everything you do. And so one of the incorrect ways to think about your marriage is to not think about it in terms of work. There is a work aspect to marriage. You have to put work in, you have to put time in, you have to cultivate it, you have to grind it out.
Yep.
And that takes energy,
Yes.
that takes strength and stamina, and then that means you're supposed to attach rest to it. So
Yeah.
you should have a season of work, and then you should have a season of rest, and you should do that every week.
Yeah.
Every week. So one of the things we talk about often and we encourage couples to do is have a date day. And everybody says, yeah, I've heard that before, and we know to do it. But the question is, how do you make your date day consistent? How do you put some boundaries around it to the extent that you're gonna hit that thing every single week, right? And
Well,
I think that's really important, and maybe we could shed some light on that.
well, for us, the same day every week happens to work. Now, we know couples like I'm thinking of a couple right now that we know, and they're both EMTs. So the same day every week may not work for them. But what you do is you look at your current schedule, your spouse's schedule, and you look at the household budget because that's also key. And then from there, you plan out your dates. Now, the reason why it's important to also look at the household budget is because a lot of people think we can't afford to date every week. Because some people think that a date means going out to a five-star restaurant,
Right.
going to see a show. But dates are all about connecting and getting to know your spouse, just taking a minute to unwind and unplug from your phone,
Right.
unplug from your emails, unplug from everything that normally causes you to be busy and on the go. So you look at your household budget and maybe you say, man, based on our budget, we can only afford a date that costs money once a month. That doesn't mean you can only date once a month. We have done hikes. We have gone for walks.
Oh, that hike was fun.
The hike was fun.
Yeah.
We've done walks around various walking trails in our city. We have done eating breakfast and watching a movie together. Like we've taken date day sometimes to be like, you know what? We're gonna stay in and we're just gonna catch up on a show that we love. And so that's how you are consistent. You have to plan for consistency. When you see Sabbath in the Bible, God planned for it. He told his children to plan for it because he said 6 days you will work and on the seventh day you will rest. He was showing us from the Old Testament that you have to plan your rest. If you do not plan your rest, meaning if you do not, in this case, plan your dates, they probably won't happen as often as they should or even as often as they could. And the other thing I would say, Mark, is the weekly date is one way to rest, but also, do you go on a retreat with your spouse? You go on a vacation with your spouse. Like, that's a way to also rest that's not weekly, but maybe it's once a year. Maybe it's twice a year. I had a supervisor when I was in graduate school, and she went on 4 vacations a year, and she said 2 of them, no, 3 of them were family vacations, but 1 was always for her and her husband. Now, back then, her kids were really young, so she just didn't want to leave them often. But she said we would go on 4 vacations a year. 3 out of the 4, our kids go with us, but there's always 1 somewhere in the year where it's just the 2 of us. No grandparents are allowed, no kids are allowed, and we unplug. And that's how they rest.
And that's good. Now, the thing there, though, is when God set up the Sabbath rest, he set it up as a system, and he set it up as law because he understands productivity.
Right.
And he's a God that is productive. So in order for his creativity to operate at its optimum level, he has to have a rhythm of rest there. And he says for you to be most productive, you're going to have to work 6 days, rest on the 7th day, because the 7th day is not so much a throwaway day. It's a productive day because the rest produces growth. So if you're a workout head, you understand this, because not only is
I'm a workout head.
Listen, we got to get it in. It's something we try and do as consistent as possible. And you've gotten a lot better.
I've always been a workout head.
Okay, let's not even go there, because I was about to say you've gotten a lot better, because like there were times in our marriage.
The Bible says that bodily exercise profits little. And so I just used to feel like, you know what? The Bible is right. Why am I out here stressing myself when it says bodily exercise profits little?
You used to think that picking up a book was exercise. And I'm
Correct,
like, no.
because my brain muscles are being worked.
No. So my thing is that when you're resting, you're actually being productive. And when you exercise, not only the days you work out, those are important days, but the actual rest days are critical to the growth of that muscle.
And the recovery.
Recovery is important because it's all a part of the system. And what people don't understand is that recovery is essential. And in your marriage, recovery is critical. And you can't recover any way you want to recover. You can't rest with your friends and expect those dividends to pour into your marriage.
That's good. So like it can't always be a girls' trip.
And you feel like it's actually impacting and making your marriage better because you're resting with your girls in DR and you're having a good time. Like, oh yeah, I always get my girls' trip in. I'm rested. Right. No, your marriage isn't rested. You need to rest in your marriage.
Right, because resting in your marriage doesn't mean that you always rest from your spouse.
Oh, that's so good. Resting from your spouse. How many people feel like rest is resting from your spouse?
Yeah, I think some people do. I mean, we have a family member who said she had a former boss who every time that boss's husband had to go out of town, her boss would be so excited. Almost to the point where she was like, "Are you okay?" Because she'd be like, "Woo, y'all, it's about to be a great week. Because guess what? My husband is away for business Monday through Friday. I can't wait for him to get..." And I'm just like, you shouldn't be that excited every time.
The question is that if you can't rest with your spouse, is your spouse really your best friend? Are you guys friends enough that not only do you work together, but you play together too? And some people can work together, but it's like their marriage is a business relationship.
Right.
And they don't know how to play together well. They don't know how to get along when there's no work involved, when we just got to sit on the beach and talk, or sit on the beach
Oh
and
yeah,
dream.
that's uncomfortable for some folks.
That is so
And it's also
uncomfortable for some people.
to know that Mark is 40 and he's sitting here not eating any fruit with his breakfast. I had potatoes, eggs, and now I'm having fruit. My plate is colorful. You have more carbs.
You know why? Because I exercise and I have rhythms of rest and I'm healthy, so I don't need to do the fruit. Like you need to do the fruit. I don't need to do the fruit because I'm good at 40. At 40. At 40.
Guys, don't go down that road. If you're under
So-
40, please don't get to 40 and think that that means you no longer need fruit.
No, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about me.
Okay.
I'm talking about me. I'm good.
Guys,
so
he'll
don't
be getting a smoothie later. Don't let him fool you. He will be drinking a smoothie later because I'm not playing this no fruits and vegetables nonsense.
All right, but you're the one calling me out about my fruit game.
Yeah, because mine is on point. Look at that fresh
All
fruit.
you want to do was show the folks the dope fruit that you had for breakfast, and I'm like, but you can do that without, casting negativity over here. But we getting off track
Okay, sorry.
because you out here talking about fruit.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that a lot of people know how to rest, but don't know how to rest in their marriage. How many people rest with friends or rest with family, extended family, but don't rest with their spouse because they see their spouse and their marriage as such a chore and such a place that they need to escape from
That's good.
instead of escaping with?
Yeah.
And it's because your marriage is too much like a business deal and you don't know how to bring fun, laughter, and playtime into your marriage.
That's good.
And you haven't really developed a strong enough relationship where you can be around that person and not have all of that work and all of that stress involved.
That's good.
And a healthy marriage is definitely a marriage that rests. Now, we talked about resting every week. We talked about resting once a year. And I feel like you also need to know how to rest from seasons.
Oh, okay.
So, right now in Charlotte, it was last couple of days has been cold. Like
Right.
February was a pretty good month. It was pretty mild for February. March started off pretty good and all of a sudden it got cold again. And we're just trying to climb out of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes the winter season in a marriage can be really, really tough.
Yes.
And you can go through financial hardship. And it feels like winter has been so long. Like you went through financial struggles for so long, for a few years. And you need to find rest in your marriage in that area. Because no relationship can be successful and sustainable if it's underweight and under stress for a prolonged period of time without rest. And so you need to know how to rest via vacations, via dates, but you need to give certain stressful areas of your relationship rest and relief.
So, what do you say then to a couple, Mark, that says, well, we've been financially strapped for like, let's say 5 years. How do I give that a rest? Because it is what it is. We don't have but so much money coming in.
Right. You need to change it up. You need to change up the system. So if you are financially strapped because one person is working and the other one's is being an entrepreneur, or if someone's in school and the other person is working like 2 or 3 jobs,
Yeah.
you need to change up the system. And
So
just
maybe
changing.
maybe the person in school, if you're that financially strapped, maybe needs to lessen their course load so that
Yeah.
maybe they could do something part-time.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
just like your body needs a change of scenery and it brings rest to your mind, your marriage may need a change of financial scenery to bring rest to your financial situations and struggles. Switch it up. You've been going down, down, down because you guys had a dream of going into the restaurant business, and it's been tough.
Yeah.
And then a pandemic hit, and you're struggling, and it just doesn't seem like there's any light ahead at the end of this tunnel.
Right.
Change it up. Change it up. It doesn't mean that you're throwing away the dream. It means that in order for our marriage to be healthy,
That's good,
we
Mark.
have to change the scenery
That's
for a
good.
season, and then maybe we pick it back up
I
again.
like that. Resting from certain seasons. And so then on the flip side, maybe you and your spouse have been the opposite, and maybe you've had so much money coming in that you've been living the high life
Yeah.
and not paying attention to your savings. So you've been over vacationing, over shopping, which
Living
leads
it
to
up.
overspending.
Yeah.
And so maybe if you're the couple that's like, oh, we're not financially strapped, we've been living it up for 5 years, well, then look at your savings account and see whether or not your current savings account and investments is in line with the money that you've been bringing in. And if it's not, I would say to that couple, maybe you need to rest from the overspending. So still enjoy yourself and have a great life,
Yeah.
but not at the expense of not planning for your future. I think this is so good, Mark, because we've been on both ends of the spectrum in our
Yeah,
marriage before.
yeah.
We've been on the end of the spectrum where we've made good money, and we've also experienced
Really low times.
Really low times. So I feel like, was it Paul who said, "I've learned how to."
Abound,
Yes.
and to be abased, to be high and to be low,
Yes.
and he learned how to be content no
Right.
matter what state. he
But I
found
will
himself.
say, during the season where we were financially strapped, what I loved is that you looked at our situation, and one day you finally said, Jen,
We gotta-
whatever
yeah.
we're doing, we actually have to stop doing it.
Right.
So some of the habits that maybe we had picked up that you were like, actually, you know what? When I sit and think about it, at least this thing and this thing is causing us to not get ahead financially.
Right.
We have to stop those things so we can stop the bleeding.
Yeah, because we weren't bringing in enough income.
Yeah.
Because we were going after certain ventures and certain dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, all right, we're going to break a rule, which we should have never done.
Yeah.
But we're actually going to use some credit cards
Yeah.
to pay for certain things. And that put us in a hole.
Yeah.
And one day we said, all right, this season has got to change.
We're gonna rest from this season, but that's a season that we will stay rested from.
Oh,
once
yeah, we ain't going back.
Because we knew better before we did it. It's
Right.
just we made a silly decision because we all make mistakes.
Right.
But that's a season. So that's the other thing: knowing which seasons you shouldn't revisit.
Oh, that's so good.
There's certain seasons or places that you shouldn't revisit. Maybe I'll say even places because you go through different seasons. But there's certain places in your marriage you shouldn't revisit.
It's like, before you keep going, it's like going on a bad vacation.
Exactly. You visit that place. That place had terrible lodging, terrible food. The weather was horrible.
Right.
You didn't like the excursions. Why would you go back? Knowing up front what it's going to mean if you go back.
Yeah.
So I think that what Mark has said is true, that you have to rest from certain seasons. There's times to be more conservative. There's times where maybe you can splurge a little bit more. But then if it's a season that you know, no matter when you go to that place, it's going to be a detriment, that's the areas that you don't go back to.
Yeah, yeah. That's the area you don't go back to. And to bring it full circle, we started off talking about this thing, talking about rest as it relates to Sabbath.
Yeah.
Jesus brought his people, the Jews, full circle. Because he says, I'm going to introduce you to a law that says you have to rest after 6 days. But then I don't want you to go back to that season anymore because you've matured and you've grown up. So I'm going to take away the Sabbath. You're greater than the Sabbath. And you don't have to abide by the Sabbath in a way that restricts you from like doing good or from helping people or not working.
Or restricts you to a specific
restricts
day.
you to a day, or you're serving the Sabbath in a religious way. I want you to be healthy, but I want to remove the law and the regulations of the Sabbath because I don't want you to go back
And
to
you
that
know,
season.
some people will come for you just off of that line because there are Christians who want to actually live under the law, we're finding.
They want to. They want to. Like if I
They
had,
know that Jesus has come to fulfill the law. Because I'm not talking about people who don't believe in Jesus. I'm
Yeah.
talking about there are Jesus believers who are like, yeah, but I still want to be bound by the law.
they want to.
By the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law.
People act like they want to
So-
be free. They don't want to be free.
Yeah.
They want to be prideful. So they'll pick up works, they'll pick up religion just to make themselves look better. And they really don't want to be free. But that's a different conversation.
Yes, yes.
I think that this conversation about rest has been helpful.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to establish and want people to walk away with the fact that rest is essential and you can
Yes.
find it in your marriage in different ways. But the important thing to do is to find rest in your marriage, not outside of your marriage.
Exactly.
Find it in your marriage. There's things you need to rest from. There's work that is complicating the marriage that you need to rest from, and then you rest with your spouse.
Yep, you rest with your spouse. And I think a lot of people, let's say you're in a season right now when you're watching this video where you feel as if you and your spouse are always at each other's throats.
Yeah.
You feel like you're never on the same page. If you're at that point in your marriage where it seems like you're just reading totally different books, ask yourself, well, when's the last time we went on a date and we actually didn't talk about bills?
Yeah.
We went on a date, we didn't talk about our jobs.
Yeah.
We went on a date and we didn't talk about, because you have to tackle those things. But resting means tackle them after the date. Tackle them before the date. But how about making sure your date is so intentional that you say, while we're on this date, here's what we're not going to talk about. Because we have dates and we try our best not to talk about our church.
Yeah.
On our dates.
Yeah.
And because we're pastors, there's always something that can be done, tweaked, fixed, a fire to put out, a person to talk to, right? But on our dates, we try to be like, hey, we love Link Church, but we're not going to talk about them on this
Right.
date.
We're not going to talk about it on this date. And I think when you brought that up, I started to think about the fact that when there's so much stress in the marriage, people don't think innately about resting with their spouse. They want to leave that person because
Yeah.
that person is bringing so much stress in their life. And so the natural tendency is to be like, let me go on a vacation by myself.
Yeah.
And that is actually more detrimental. We're not saying you can never go on a vacation
Right.
by yourself.
Or
We're
you
not
can't ever
saying
go on a
don't
girls'
go on a girls'
trip.
trip or
Yeah.
anything like that. But one of the most healthy ways to fix stress and animosity and strife between you and your spouse is to come closer together.
Exactly. That reminds me, Mark,
It's to come closer together.
A celebrity couple we watched years ago who, everything unfortunately for them played out on TV, but they were saying that they were having so many issues that they decided that they were going to separate so that they could work on their marriage.
Yeah.
And I remember in that moment, you were like, Jay, chances are that's not going to work because if you feel like there's this much tension in your marriage, that's the person that you actually should take a plane ticket and go away with. They separated, and to this day, they're not together. They ended up getting a divorce.
Right.
And you were saying, even back then, if you're having that much trouble with your spouse, you don't separate from them because you said what's going to happen to this couple is they're going to actually start getting comfortable not being with their spouse because they're with their own thoughts, they're in their own
Yeah.
space, and then something's telling them, oh, this is actually better than marriage.
Yeah. And what we're saying is that when you're married, everything is together.
Yeah.
If it's gonna work, you have to do it together. It doesn't mean that other people, other things don't matter.
Right.
It means though that if you're gonna rest well in your marriage, you have to rest together. And I thought that was so interesting and a great example to bring up that often when people find trouble in their marriage, they go seek solitude and rest away from their spouse. But then how does the problem get any better? Like, you come back together and the problem's still there. It's actually worse because it metastasizes and it grows
Exactly.
because you have neglected it. And there's many ways to get some rest and get some help. And
Yeah.
we could
So
talk
we just
about
want
all
you
that
to
stuff.
take all of these tools
Yeah.
and now do your homework.
Yep.
And if you haven't already found a rhythm of rest, we want you to do your homework, which is to stop what you're doing before this week ends.
Yeah.
And find the rhythm that's going to work for you.
It's good. It's so good. It's so good. Well, y'all, we getting up out of here. This has been another episode of Breakfast with Mark and Jen, and we hope and pray that this one helped you in some way and help your marriage.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You had those pauses in there, and like it makes it like extra
Yeah, it makes it more weighty.
strong. Yeah, I like it. We're out of here, y'all. Have a good one. Take care.